Some of these actors died before the movie even came out. Others never made another film because the shoot went fatally wrong. One let a convicted predator behind the camera and it destroyed the kid in front of it. Another pushed a rising star into a murder scene. These are the 80s movies that destroyed their actors' lives, on set, off set, and forever. Vic Morrow was a well-known character actor, probably best remembered from the TV show Combat in the 60s. But his final film role ended in tragedy that changed the industry. In Twilight Zone, the movie, Morrow played the lead in one of the anthology segments, directed by John Landis. It was a Vietnam War scene, filmed at night, loaded with explosions, special effects, and a low-flying helicopter. On the final night of filming, July 23, 1982, something went horribly wrong. Pyrotechnics triggered too early, and the chopper lost control. It crashed straight into Morrow and two child actors. All three were killed instantly. It became one of the worst on-set accidents in Hollywood history. Landis and others faced manslaughter charges, the first time a director was put on trial for a fatal film accident. They were eventually acquitted, but the damage was done. Morrow's final performance made it into the finished film, which was released in 1983 under a cloud of controversy. For his family, including his daughter, actress Jennifer Jason Leigh, Twilight Zone, the movie, isn't just another credit. It's the end of the line, literally. Clownhouse was supposed to be a low-budget horror flick about three brothers stalked by escaped lunatics dressed as clowns. The lead role went to 12-year-old Nathan Forrest Winters, a kid who'd wanted to act since he was 5. This was going to be his big break. What happened instead was worse than anything in the movie. Behind the scenes, director Victor Salva was abusing Winters during and after production. He was arrested in 1988 before the film even came out. Salva was convicted, served just 15 months, and later got hired again to direct major Hollywood films, including Powder and Jeepers Creepers. Meanwhile, Winters was done. He never acted again. He later said that after testifying, he was basically warned he'd never work in the industry again. And that was it. Clownhouse became both his debut and his exit. Poltergeist is one of the most iconic horror films of the 80s, and it's also at the center of what people call the Poltergeist curse. Whether you believe in that or not, what happened to Dominique Dunne was all too real. Dunne played Dana, the teenage daughter in the Freeling family, and the role was supposed to be her breakout. She came from a high-profile literary family, and Poltergeist was a major hit. She was already set to appear in the sequel. But just months after the movie came out, Dunne was attacked by her ex-boyfriend outside her West Hollywood home. He strangled her into a coma. 5 days later, she was taken off life support. She was only 22. Her killer ended up convicted of voluntary manslaughter and served less than 3 years. The sentence sparked outrage. Dunne's murder was the first in a series of tragedies tied to the Poltergeist films, which is why people started talking about a curse. Heather O'Rourke was the face of the Poltergeist series. She was just 5 years old when Spielberg discovered her. By the time Poltergeist III came around, she was a seasoned child actor. She filmed her scenes in 1987, but what no one on that set knew was that Heather had an undiagnosed medical condition, a congenital blockage in her intestines. In early 1988, just months before the film's release, she suddenly got sick. Septic shock set in and she died during surgery. She was 12 years old. The studio had to finish the movie without her. They used a body double for the final scenes. Poltergeist III was released posthumously, and the entire project was dedicated to her. Natalie Wood had been a star since childhood. Miracle on 34th Street, Rebel Without a Cause, West Side Story. She had one of those rare careers that actually lasted, but it ended in a way that's still talked about to this day. In 1981, she was filming Brainstorm, a sci-fi film about a machine that can record human thoughts. Her co-star was Christopher Walken. Production was nearly done when tragedy struck. Over Thanksgiving weekend, during a break in filming, Wood was on a yacht with Walken and her husband, Robert Wagner. Sometime during the night, she went overboard. Her body was found hours later. Her death was ruled accidental, but the circumstances, the timing, the lack of witnesses, left a lot of unanswered questions. Investigations continued for years, and theories still fly around to this day. At the time of her death, she still had a couple of scenes left in Brainstorm. Production halted for over a year. The script was rewritten, and the movie was eventually released in 1983, dedicated to her memory. Dorothy Stratten had the kind of momentum that Hollywood notices. She'd gone from Playboy Playmate of the Year to starring in a film alongside Audrey Hepburn and John Ritter, They All Laughed, directed by Peter Bogdanovich. The movie was supposed to launch her career for real, but before it ever saw a release, everything came to a violent halt. On August 14, 1980, Stratton's estranged husband, Paul Snyder, jealous, possessive, and angry over her success and new relationship with Bogdanovich, lured her to their house. He shot and killed her, then took his own life. She was just 20. Studios panicked. No one wanted to touch the film after the murder. Eventually, Bogdanovich bought the rights himself and released it independently in 1981. By the early 80s, John Belushi was one of the biggest comedy stars in America. Saturday Night Live, Animal House, The Blues Brothers. He was on fire. In 1981, he reunited with Dan Aykroyd for Neighbors, a dark comedy about suburban chaos. Belushi actually played against type, the uptight neighbor, while Aykroyd played the wild one. It was a risky switch. But behind the scenes, things were rough. Belushi's drug use was getting worse. The production was tense, the creative team clashed constantly, and Belushi wasn't happy with the director. He even tried to get him replaced. Neighbors was released that December, and just a few months later, on March 5, 1982, Belushi died of a drug overdose in LA. He was 33 years old. The movie didn't do much at the box office and got mixed reviews, but it gained attention as Belushi's final film. Whatever comeback he might have had, whatever direction his career was going to take, Neighbors ended up being the last page. Roy Kinnear was one of those actors everyone recognized. A British character actor with a long resume, from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory to the earlier 3 Musketeers films. In 1988, he was back on set for the return of the Musketeers. 15 years had passed since the original. This was meant to be a lighthearted reunion, and then the accident happened. While filming a scene on horseback in Spain, Kinnear fell and broke his pelvis. He was rushed to a hospital in Madrid, but died the next day from internal bleeding. He was 54. The movie was finished and released the next year, dedicated to him. His family sued the production and won. The director, Richard Lester, reportedly quit filmmaking altogether after what happened. Judith Barsi was everywhere in the late 80s. Commercials, TV shows, voice roles. Most people know her as Ducky from The Land Before Time. Her next major role was in All Dogs Go to Heaven, voicing Anne-Marie, the orphan girl who could talk to animals. She had finished recording her voice tracks when tragedy struck. In July 1988, Judith and her mother were murdered by her father, who had a history of abuse and threats. He then set fire to their home and took his own life. Judith was only 10 years old. All Dogs Go to Heaven was released the following year. Her performance remained in the film, and it was dedicated to her memory. Marty Feldman was one of the most recognizable comic actors of the 70s and early 80s, mostly thanks to Young Frankenstein, where he played Igor with that unforgettable stare and deadpan delivery. By 1982, Feldman was filming Yellowbeard, a pirate comedy packed with big names: Graham Chapman, Peter Boyle, Cheech and Chong. Feldman played Gilbert, a bumbling crew member. It wasn't a lead role, but he brought his usual energy to it. During filming in Mexico, Feldman suffered a heart attack after shooting a scene and died in his hotel room. He was 48. Only one scene, his character's death, hadn't been filmed. They finished it with a double. The movie came out in 1983 and was dedicated to him, along with a couple of other actors who also passed around the same time. Yellowbeard didn't land with critics or audiences, but for fans of Feldman, it became his final screen appearance.